Okay, we're down to method 4 for solving quadratics. So remember, method 1 was factoring, method 2, the square root property, method 3, completing the square, and here's our method 4, so solving by the quadratic formula. The nice thing about the quadratic formula is it works for any quadratic. So technically, on all those other ones that we did, you could check them using the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula says this: if you have a quadratic in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, the solution is found by taking the opposite of your b term, the opposite of the b, or your x coefficient, plus or minus the square root, in parentheses, b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing over 2a. This is similar to when we factored and had to identify our a, b, and c. A is always on x squared, b is always on x, and c is always your constant. All right, so let's talk about your steps to solving using the quadratic formula. Not a bad idea when you study to write these steps down somewhere else so you can keep the steps straight so that you know what to do first in each situation. So step number 1, make sure one side is 0. And if you make yourself a list of steps, you'll notice that's the same step, very first step we used when we factored. So when you factor and when you use quadratic formula, one side has to be 0. Second step for quadratic formula, once one side is 0, you want to identify A, B, and C and plug them in. You're going to plug them into that formula. Okay, once you get them plugged in, cleaning that formula up, there's kind of a method to it to make sure we don't make mistakes. To do it, you're going to calculate the value under the radical. So you're going to plug those numbers under that square root into your calculator, but you're not going to put the square root in, just the numbers. So calculate the value under the radical and simplify the radical if possible. So calculate the value under, not including the radical in your calculator, and clean it up if you can. Then once you do that, you're going to pull apart the fraction and simplify further if you can. And if you look back to the previous section, section 2.1, at the bottom of that very first page, we had some problems that were fractions with radicals right under where we did the radicals. And we pulled them apart and tried to clean them up. That's exactly what you're doing in step 3 and 4. So once we get to step 3 and 4, you've already done this process. I'm just showing you why we've already done it, because we had to know it when we use quadratic formula.